Welcome to the Attractions Group podcast. I'm Ryan Sir. This is episode 24, and we have a very special one for you. Don's a little bit under the weather, so I'm flying solo, but that does not mean I'm alone because I've got a very special guest this evening. Before we get started, remember to follow us on Twitter at attractions_GRP. Search for the Attractions Group podcast on YouTube, and make sure that you follow us on your favorite podcast app. Now, without further ado, I present to you the world's foremost theme park journalist, Mr. Arthur Levine. How's it going, Arthur?
Hey, it's going great, Ryan. Thank you for that generous introduction. I don't know that I necessarily earned that moniker, but I'll take it.
I think you did. Arthur, why don't you tell us about yourself and what you do?
Well, I am a theme park and travel journalist. I have been doing this for just about 30 years, so it's been quite a while, quite a long time. And I have over the course of the past 3 decades, I have seen journalism go through some what's the word? Cataclysmic
Cataclysmic.
changes. There we go. And so I've tried to evolve with the industry. But one thing that's remained constant is that I absolutely love and have a great passion for theme parks and amusement parks and roller coasters and everything to do with them. And I want to tell that story. And so I keep trying to find new ways to do that. And most recently, excuse me, the way that I have been doing that is at my Substack, which is about themeparks.fund. That's ABOUT themeparks.fun, where I cover the industry and provide news and information about parks and the attractions industry, as well as my own personal thoughts about what's going on in the industry and ride reviews and everything else. Directly to subscribers. And so people can subscribe to my Substack by going to aboutthemeparks.fun, and then twice a week they'll get my posts about the industry. So that's what's going on right now with what I'm doing, and I'm having a ball as I have been having for the past 30 years covering this great industry.
That's amazing, Arthur. I'll tell you what, though. Obviously, anytime we have a guest on here, I take some time to do some research and, read up on what they do, and that way we can formulate the questions and have an intelligent conversation. But I started reading your website Sunday night about themeparks.fun, and I was just like, I'll read a few articles and then we'll see what happens. That was around 7, and then I put it down at midnight. So that's how addicting your writing is. So I like your style. It's very cool. Will you talk about your journey that you've gone on for the past several decades to get to the point where you're this like independent journalist?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for the kind words,
Oh,
by the
it's my
way. That's
pleasure.
very kind of you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a long, strange journey. It began 30 years ago, as I said. I just have always had a passion for theme parks. It's inexplicable. I can't really uh, describe why. It's just something that I love, and I suspect that there are a lot of people out there, perhaps many people that are listening to your podcast, that kind of feel the same way. And I somehow wanted to get involved in the industry and didn't really know how. But I had a background in writing and journalism, and um, I found out that there was a magazine called Theme Park. The actual name of the magazine was Theme Park. Um, 30 years ago, that was being published in southern New Hampshire. I live in northern Massachusetts, so it wasn't too far away from me. And the magazine actually hadn't come out yet. I saw an advertisement for this magazine that was going to be published. And so I went up to New Hampshire. I met with the publisher and kind of talked my way into writing the cover story for the first issue of Theme Park Magazine, which was about the Back to the Future attraction. And that kind of kicked off my theme park journalism career.
What? Oh,
Um, Tragically, if you want to if you want me to continue telling this crazy
please do.
story, the publisher, who was, I believe, in his 40s, was at Disneyland it was about a year and a half or 2 years after the magazine started publishing. He was at Disneyland covering a story, and was staying at the Disneyland Hotel, and had a massive heart attack and passed away at
Oh
Disneyland,
man.
which is tragic and terrible, a bit poetic perhaps, but that was the end of Theme Park Magazine, and I found myself wanting to continue to write about the industry and not quite sure how. That was a very niche publication. So then I had the idea of self-syndicating my own newspaper column. And these things that I'm talking about, newspapers and magazines, I hope that the people watching and listening to the podcast know what those are. And of course, I'm joking a little bit, but not too much, because the print versions of magazines and newspapers are certainly um, evolving and on the decline. But back about 28 years ago or so, newspapers were still quite viable, and so I developed this column that I called "What's the Attraction?" about theme parks, and I sold it to Sunday editions of newspapers all across the country. So I was in the Denver Post and the Syracuse Herald American, and the Columbus Dispatch, and papers all over the place, writing once a month about theme parks. And even back then, we're talking about 25, 24, 23 years ago, newspapers started contracting a bit and budgets got tighter, and it got harder and harder for me to maintain that newspaper column. And around the time when I was thinking of just giving it up altogether, I kind of lucked into an online gig with what was then known as About.com, which was a huge online network that covered all kinds of different topics, virtually everything. So they had what were known as guides, Guides, about automobiles, about religion, about food, about virtually anything, everything you can think of, including travel. And I was the theme parks guide at About.com. And that goes back to 2002, so 20 years ago, I started doing that. And that, by the way, is why to this day I kind of maintain that about word. It's why I call my site About Theme Parks, because a lot of people know me from my many, many years at About.com. Um, but About.com evolved into Trip Savvy, and I continued writing for them. When the pandemic hit, um, Trip Savvy, as was the case with many travel sites, had some challenges, and I was no longer able to do that after having been with them for about 19, 20 years. Newspapers. At the same time that I was writing for Trip Savvy, I also was doing a lot of freelance writing, primarily with USA Today, who I was with for many, many years, but also the New York Post and Vox Media and all kinds of other publications, both online and in print. But as I was saying just a few moments ago, journalism has evolved dramatically, and newspapers, it's no secret that many of them are closing, and are their staffs are becoming smaller and smaller. And so it's been about 7 or 8 months now that I went the route of many journalists, and I started my own Substack. There are an awful lot of journalists who have made the jump. And what's different about Substack, for people who are listening to this who may not be familiar with it, it is a direct to subscriber model. So the way it works, rather than me writing for a third party, whether it's a print newspaper or whether it's online for USA Today or for Trip Savvy, um, and having them publish my work, and then they generally would generate revenue. The business model was to have advertising. With Substack, it's ad free. There are no ads. I'm not trying to get people to come to my site. What I'm trying to do is to generate subscribers, like-minded people, people who love theme parks, love attractions. Um, I get them to sign up as a subscriber, and then I send directly via email my posts on a twice a week basis. So it's a little bit of a different model. And I have you can become a subscriber to aboutthemeparks.fun for free, and you get most of nearly everything that I write. But for those who choose to become paid subscribers, which is the way that I make money on this, it's the only way that I make money because, as I said, there is no advertising. I have some bonus content that I provide, and so if people want to support me and support the work that I'm doing, they become paid subscribers, and in return, they get some bonus content. So that is a really long way of letting you know the journey that I've been on all these years and what I'm doing now.
Well, I appreciate it. Also, thank you for full disclosure. You just made the quip about, for those of you who are younger, you don't know what newspapers and magazines are. You kind of had to explain what Substack was to me right before we went on the air. So I appreciate you clarifying that because I think it's a lot of tool that maybe people use but they don't know about. You know?
Hmm.
So tell us about the subscription model. Is obviously this is subject to change because this is going to be available, here on out in the future. But what's the cost of subscription as of, today in December of 2022?
It is $60 for an annual
Okay.
subscription, and as I said, that gets you two posts per week. So that's what, 104 posts, I
Hmm.
think, for the low price of only $60. And I also have there is a monthly option where people can sign up for $6 a month. So those are that's the price point.
Awesome. That's really cool. Um, So, how would you say that things have changed? I mean, obviously, like journalism in general has changed quite a bit over the past 20 years, especially. In the age of social media, how has social media affected what you do particularly?
Well, social media has upended pretty much everything, I would say, including newspapers and online journalism. And the theme park industry is certainly not immune to the incredible impact of social media. And I have to say, full disclosure on my part, I'm a bit of a dinosaur, as folks who are looking at this, the video version of this podcast can tell I'm no spring chicken. And the fact that I've been doing this for 30 years is kind of a giveaway, too. I mean, literally, when I started in 1992, the internet was really just beginning, barely beginning. It really took a few years after that before the internet itself became a thing, let alone social media. So, I have a pretty good Twitter following myself, less so with Facebook, and that's really the extent of my social media influence. I'm not on Instagram, and I'm not on YouTube. I'm not doing videos, although I certainly incorporate videos into my Substack. But yeah, social media has really just upended everything. Um, there, of course, I'm sure you're familiar, and folks listening and watching this are familiar with the term social media
Hmm.
influencers. And when I go to events as a journalist, I'm certainly there in company with social media influencers and people who are bloggers and maybe more, casual fans of the industry, but are getting involved as bloggers or in some other ways. So, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but clearly social media has had an incredible impact on journalism in general, certainly on theme park journalism and on theme parks in general.
Yeah, yeah. No, you've absolutely answered my question, and honestly, the impact is so large that I don't really think that you can really, without taking an hour, talk about. You could go down every avenue and talk about. Well, when we talk about first to market. social media is always going to be first to market because you can tweet well before you can be the first in the headlines. And then,
Sure.
that tweet or that Facebook post or that YouTube video can be out long before that newspaper hits someone's front step. So I completely agree. Besides social media, what else has changed in the let's say the journalism industry with working with parks and stuff like that?
Well, um, I, I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question. I mean, it's constantly
Hmm.
evolving, but I know when I started many, many years ago, I would say when I started many, many years ago, television was kind of king. If there was a pecking order, all the folks in television and when they would show up with crews with cameras on their shoulders and stuff, they were kind of at the front of the pack. And print journalists like myself were kind of we sort of took a back seat, and there was no such thing as online media back then. Today that's kind of flipped. I mean, online media and social media, that's kind of where it's at. Um, Print journalism, where it exists at all, is barely a blip. So it's evolved dramatically, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to print journalism, the relevance of even New York Times and Washington Post and stuff like that is they're online. So their physical
Sure.
newspapers are next to nothing. So, another
Right.
thought that I know, like Don always told me, when he was with the Mighty Duck, or not with the Mighty Ducks, when he was with the Cincinnati Cyclones in the '90s, well, and in the Mighty Ducks in the early 2000s, there were beat journalists from the Cincinnati Enquirer that would follow them on the road and so on. He's like, nowadays, even with like a big ride announcement or something, the local anchor shows up, they set up their own camera, they go live, they hold the camera, they say, so everything is like, it seems like they just don't have the budget that they used to. I think that's a big change. And then, your experience alone, obviously there were things like, 9/11, the pandemic and stuff like that, that kind of directly affected you. But, as far as sustainability as being a third party with USA Today and stuff like that, um, it seems like that's changed a lot too. It would be difficult to do that in today's world. Would you agree with that?
Well, not only would I agree with it, I've walked away from it and am trying something totally different. But to your point, Ryan, or maybe I just want to make the
Mhm.
point that um, when when we started talking, you characterized, or when we were talking earlier, we were talking about how to explain what it is that I do now, and you were saying, well, perhaps what you do is a blog, and in some ways, what I do could be construed as a blog, but the reason why I bristled a bit at that description is because what I bring to about themeparks.fun to my Substack is sort of the same journalistic editorial integrity that I've had my entire career, the same principles that I used at USA Today and TripSavvy and About.com and the New York Post and all the other places for which I've written. I bring that same kind of dedication and professionalism to about themeparks.fun. So I'm not I'm not just taking a press release and, writing it, copying it 85% verbatim and putting in a few extra periods and commas here and there. I'm trying to do some actual reporting and getting some, doing some interviews and getting first source material and really devoting the attention and giving the time to the stories that I write, and also, really trying to respect the readers, the subscribers, respect their intelligence, respect their interest and passion for the industry by sharing my expertise with them. So even though the communication method may have changed, the way that I go about my job has really remained pretty much intact.
Yeah, I mean, and I completely see your point. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of it today is first to market. And in all fairness, if you're a YouTuber, if you're the first one to have a video up, that's good news for you. That's part of your business model. But, when there's an aspect of old school journalism in terms of journalistic integrity, getting all the facts right, getting the story right, making sure that you're laying out exactly what's happening, in a correct and integrated manner. I think that that's something that's almost lost in media today. So I'm glad that you bring that up. Because even mainstream media in a lot of cases wants to be first because they are competing with your regular blogger and your Twitter person and so on. Yeah.
See, that's the beauty of Substack, and I hope that people can appreciate that I'm not necessarily competing for eyeballs and trying to get as many page views as I can. I'm not at all trying to be first. I'm trying to be the best, and I'm trying to get correct information and check my sources and make sure I get the facts straight because I want to deliver the very best content that I can to my subscribers. So I'm not beholden to clickbait or to any kind of silly any silly headline gotchas
Right.
or SEO silliness uh, that is all too rampant online these days. I'm just trying to do the very best job that I can for the people who love the industry like I do and want to read about it and read accurate information.
So how do you market your Substack? Like how do you reach people that may not know about it?
I go on great podcasts like yours
Oh, that's
is one
amazing.
way.
I hope that every single person who listens subscribes because you know what? It'll be good for them because you've got an excellent Substack. So you talked about getting all the facts right and stuff, but you were on the History Channel and they talked about a park called Geauga Lake. Common mispronunciation of Geauga Lake. How did you let
I
that slip?
I did not say that
No, you did
myself.
not. I think it was the
And
host.
and I did not, and there were some other there was some other inaccurate information and some curious choices that the producers of that show made, for which I take no responsibility. It was a lot of fun being on the show, and hopefully I came across well. But yeah, I was scratching my head a bit at some of the information that was shared on
It's
that.
definitely going to go through several hands, but I don't want to glaze over this. So, the show is called The Fast History of, and then your
Yes.
episode was season one, episode 13. It was the last one, right?
Hmm.
And that's The Fast History of Amusement Parks.
Correct.
So that's the coolest thing you've done, by the way. I think that's so neat that you've been on the History Channel. Oh, well, on History because they don't call it the History Channel anymore. Tell me more about how that came to be.
Well, you say it's the coolest thing I've done, and it's certainly one of the coolest things that I've done. But I've actually been on quite a few programs through the years. I've been on CBS This Morning. I was on CBS Sunday Morning. I've been on a number of programs through the years, and so that was actually one of many. Um, the way it came about is I got a call from the producers. I think they just probably did some online research and they were doing this show about amusement parks and wanted to find out who may know something about amusement parks and could come on and talk about it. And my name came up from all the years writing about parks for USA Today and for Trip Savvy and About.com and all the other places. So that I guess is how it happened.
That's incredible. Did you have to fly out to Hollywood or did they come to you or how'd that work?
That was actually in New York City. So that's where the show was taped. And I live in Massachusetts, which isn't too far away. So my wife and I got in the car and drove down, and so it really worked out pretty well.
Awesome. And I'll include a link to that episode in the description of both the podcast and the YouTube description because if you have most cable subscriptions, you can log in and watch it. That's how I was able to watch it. So I appreciate
Hmm.
you shedding some light on that. Like I said, that's really cool. Like I said, I'm a big fan of history and Pawn Stars and Ancient Aliens and all that stuff. So to talk to somebody that's been on that, it's kind of neat. I'm sorry, I'm geeking out. All right. Um, So here's a think tank one for you. So if you
Sure.
were gonna have a Mount Rushmore of 4 people that were the most important people to the theme park industry over the past 50 years, who would be on it?
Yeah, I was telling you really when I saw your questions, I was really puzzling over some of these, and this is certainly one of them. So you say 50 years, so I guess that precludes the opening of Disneyland, which goes back 60 plus years.
Yeah, we're
But
talking about, roller coaster renaissance to the current. So, like, s 7 early 70s to the current.
right, right. Well, I didn't focus on roller coasters, and I hope that's
Oh,
okay.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, because looking at theme park history, I mean, if we were talking about roller coaster history, the names would be quite different. But for theme park history, I cheated a bit and went a little beyond 50 years, and I would say number one would be the New York World's Fair, which goes back to 1964-65. So that's a little beyond the 50-year envelope,
That's
but
okay.
um, that was important, very important, because um, Disneyland was already open and pretty well established by then. But the four attractions that Walt Disney developed for the New York World's Fair, which included It's a Small World, the GE Carousel of Progress, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and Ford's Magic Skyway, were incredibly groundbreaking. It wasn't the first time that audio animatronics were used for theme park attractions, but it was certainly the most ambitious and the splashiest. And especially the Carousel of Progress was just mind-boggling back in 1964-65. And to let folks know how old I am, or at least give a hint of how old I am, I was at the New York World's Fair, and I was one of the people geeking out. I was very young, but as a youngster, I went to these four attractions, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe that this kind of entertainment existed in the world. And for me personally, it was certainly an eye-opening, seminal experience. And I know for a lot of people of a certain age in the theme park industry, the New York World's Fair was very, very important. And of course, all of those attractions in one form or another made their way back to Disneyland and Disney World, and really kind of changed the course of theme parks in general. Um, the second thing that I would say in terms of pivotal events in theme park history would be the opening of Walt Disney World, which of course is just wrapping up its 50-year anniversary.
Right.
And Walt Disney World itself, or I should say the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World, which is its version of Disneyland, itself isn't particularly groundbreaking, but the fact that it is was designed from the very start, from the ground up, as a destination theme park resort, really changed not only theme parks, but vacations and travel as we know it. Its influence is phenomenal. Certainly, its influence in Central Florida, I mean, it completely changed the city of Orlando and the region there. It's extraordinary what has happened there, and it's extraordinary its influence throughout the world. So that I would say that would be the second event.
Mhm.
The the third one, and again, I'm just kind of spitballing
Sure.
here. I don't know, people would may certainly disagree with these choices, but I would say the third one perhaps is Tokyo Disneyland. And again, the park itself is really just the third iteration of Disneyland, so that in itself wasn't groundbreaking. What was groundbreaking, I think, is that it took the this very American notion of what a theme park is and exported it to another part of the world, in this case, Tokyo. And in doing so, um, kind of started this trend of these destination theme park resorts being accepted in in Asia and in other parts of the world, and really was the forebearer of many um, destination theme park resorts. And its influence, again, is incredible, not only in terms of theme parks, but if you think about themed restaurants and the effect of theme parks on things like museums and casinos and restaurants, I mean, all of these things people had to be exposed to at first, and the way that this idea of what a theme park is, the way that people were exposed to it was by exporting it to places like Tokyo. Sure, um, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people have come to Florida to visit Disney World, but this idea of taking the Disney theme park and opening it in other parts of the world has really, I think, just spread the theme park tentacles throughout the world. So that I would say would be the third thing, and the fourth thing would be the opening of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter at Universal Orlando. That so radically changed the idea of what a theme park land could be and perhaps should be. This idea of a single property IP, this slavish attention to detail, this just incredible immersion, just really, really upped the game for theme parks and kind of set the bar at a whole new level, which Disney found themselves having to kind of catch up to a little bit. Um, and it just raised the bar for everybody, I think, all over the world. So those would be the four pivotal events on my theme park Mount Rushmore, I guess.
It's funny when I was, thinking of this question, I was, trying to make sure that it was fair. So I was trying to think of what would be on mine, and what the funny part was that the Harry Potter installation at Universal Islands of Adventure did make my list, and I think if anything, it transformed that chain. Because
Oh gosh, yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think they were in a situation where they were owned by a private equity firm and stuff, and who knows what could have happened, but, they were able to take that leap and, from what I understand, they snatched it from the jaws of Disney, giving,
Yeah,
JK
yeah.
was it what's her name? JK Rowling? Yes,
Yes.
JK, they
Yep.
gave her more creative control and let her, kind of dictate exactly what happens, and
You've got it. Yep.
I mean, there's nothing like that place, and it's funny because on that same token, down at IAPA, brought my girlfriend down there. She had never really been to Orlando before. We went to Universal for several days after the convention, and I had to explain to her that Universal Studios before 2008 and after 2008 are two completely different places because it was really good in 1990 and it never got any better. Then in 2008, it stepped on the gas, and now it's. I mean, it gets up there with Disney. It really does.
Well, I'd argue with you that in 2000, when Islands of Adventure opened and Spider-Man opened and some other attractions, that was sort of the next evolution of Universal. But certainly, the opening of Harry Potter was just on a whole different level. And you're absolutely right, Ryan, that it was soon before, very soon before, the Wizarding World opened that um, Comcast bought
Hmm.
Universal, and at the time that they were that they closed that deal, the thought was that looking at the entire NBC Universal portfolio, the general feeling was that they were probably going to get rid of the theme parks. That just wasn't in their wheelhouse,
Right.
wasn't anything they were particularly interested in. And it was very soon afterwards that the Wizarding World opened, and I think the accountants probably took a look at the Butterbeer sales alone for, 1 month and said, "Oh my goodness, what are we sitting on here?" And ever since then, they've been nothing but 100% in when it comes to theme parks. And so, yeah, on so many levels, the Wizarding World was just an incredible, seminal moment in theme park
Yeah,
history.
and it's almost like you almost worry about where the parks would be, all of the Universal parks would be had they been spun off or something. Because just look at like how SeaWorld went when the Anheuser-Busch spin-off with InBev and all that. I mean, it
Yep.
seems like it's gonna be okay now, but there was a long time there when it wasn't looking good. And it was mainly because you take a company, you make a brand new company with brand new people, and then you load it with all the debt that you used to buy the company. So, I mean, just imagine 100, 200, $300 billion worth of debt attached to these parks that have a high overhead anyway. I mean, I wonder if all of them would have survived. That's a real
Yeah,
question.
it's a great question, and I absolutely agree with you. Universal has had a lot of fits and starts through the years, but certainly when Potter came into the picture, that changed their fortunes incredibly, and thank God, because I think there's nothing better for the industry than competition. And for many, many years, Disney was the top dog, and nobody, people would poke at them a bit, but they were sitting on top, and there was no question about it. That's no longer the case. I mean, um, they're certainly arguably still at the top of the heap, but Universal is not all that far behind. And with Epic Universe in the wings, who knows what's going to happen over the next few years?
Yeah, I completely agree. And the real question, because we know Epic Universe is going to be excellent. We've seen what they can do. The real question is, what's Disney gonna do in response to Epic Universe? That's that I
Mhm.
mean, do they've never really in the last, like, 10 or so years that I know of, expressed interest in adding an extra gate or anything like that, so what they'll probably do is massive renovations to the current parks. So if you look at it, Hollywood Studios, I mean, last time I was there was, like, 7 or 8 years ago. There's barely a park. Everything was under construction because they were redoing the entire thing. Now Epcot's
Right.
getting that treatment. So where do you go next? That's a really good question to ask, and to see where it pushes Disney to its limits is going to be really interesting because usually when Disney does stuff, they do it best. But they've got somebody else sitting on the shelf now, so it'll be interesting to see where the future lays with that.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly will be interesting. In terms of a direct response, I mean, Epic Universe, you were there not that long
Right,
ago, and I'm sure you saw the vertical construction going on. This park is going to open in 2025, and you can, pretty much take Universal's word when they say they're going to open something. They have a pretty good track record about sticking to it. And if Disney was going to respond directly to that, they kind of missed the boat. I think at this point, it would be pretty hard to have a direct response. Maybe something a little farther down the road, 26, 27, 28. Then there might be something happening. Of course, the pandemic just upended everything.
right.
There may have been some kind of response in the wings, and then the pandemic hit, and but now we're getting off on crazy tangents, so
Yeah,
who
yeah, let's
knows?
not theorize this crazy stuff. We're not on the History Channel anymore. All right. Okay, piggybacking off the previous question about the Mount Rushmore, who's your four people that you would put on the Mount Rushmore? I tell you what, the original question said 50 years. I'll let you whatever time period you want. The four theme period. Well, because I realize that, like, you if you don't put Walt Disney on it, it's dumb. Yeah.
Well, that's what I said. I've got next to the question, I've got Walt with two exclamation marks. So yeah, I mean, he has to go at the top of the list. Without Walt Disney, arguably there are no theme parks
Right.
really. Um, so the influence of Walt Disney and Disneyland and the Disney parks has just been incredible. But I did prepare for people who kind of fit into um, the 50-year timeline that you've
All right, let's see
established
what you
here.
got.
Although I have to say, this was very difficult, and I really had to think this one through. I would say number one is Marty Sklar, and for those who aren't familiar with him, Marty worked alongside Walt Disney. Um, he was quite young at the time, and he started out as a writer actually, but stayed with the company for many, many years, and eventually became the head of Imagineering.
Wow.
And after Walt Disney passed away, the company was kind of fumbling. Disney World did eventually get built. And Walt Disney had this grand dream, sort of on his deathbed. He went to his death with this dream of the experimental prototype city or community of tomorrow, Epcot. And that, of course, evolved into the theme park, but it was Marty Sklar who kind of ushered Epcot into kind of willed it into existence and marshaled all the resources and had an incredible influence post Walt Disney on the Disney parks, certainly on Epcot, but on many of the Disney parks as well. Marty also had the distinction of being the only person alive up until his death a few years ago, of having attended the opening of every single Disney park around the world, including Shanghai Disneyland, which was the last one to open. Um, so he's number one on my Mount Rushmore.
Awesome. Excellent choice.
Number t- At number two, this is where it starts getting much more difficult. I chose Michael Eisner and Frank Wells. I kind of would like to reserve
Okay.
two spots for and you know, Michael Eisner is a bit of a controversial choice, probably. Towards the end of his tenure with Disney, he was not perhaps at the height of his career, let's say. But when he started, he, along with Frank Wells, who was his right-hand person, came in at a very pivotal time in the history of the Walt Disney Company. Um, Again, they were still sort of fumbling a bit after Walt Disney had passed away. They were still trying to sort of second guess what would Walt do. But Michael came in with his background in the movie industry. He had some really ambitious ideas and kind of brought his own vision, along with Frank Wells, um, to um, to the Disney company, and he was kind of the chief architect of this enormous expansion, not only of the theme parks but also of the entire company, the movie industry, the movie side of the business. Um, I believe it was Michael Eisner who orchestrated the purchase of ABC
Yep,
television,
he did.
and so he was just an extremely pivotal person at a very um, difficult time when he came into the Disney industry.
Yeah, and let me pause there. So the one of the significant thing, and you hit all the points that I would hit, but
Hmm.
the elephant in the room is the fact that Disney would probably be owned by Comcast now if it weren't for Michael Eisner. Remember, they were at the risk of
Could
a hostile takeover, but
That's right.
partially due to the purchase of ABC and stuff like that, bloated the company, and I mean bloated as in added assets, not bloated as in bureaucracy, and it made it almost untouchable. And it's the company that it is today because of Eisner. And he
Hmm.
built Animal Kingdom. I'm sure you like that. All right, who's your third
Yeah,
person?
yeah. Yeah, this is where it gets a little crazy, and some people are going to say, "What the heck is this guy talking about?" This is more of a personal choice, I
Sure.
guess, than anything else. But I'm going to say for my third person on Mount Rushmore, I'm going to pick Doug Trumbull, and I'm going to explain who Doug Trumbull is because most people probably don't know who he is, and would see this as a very curious choice. When I wrote that article 30 years ago for Theme Park Magazine about the Back to the Future attraction, one of the reasons that I wrote about it is because Doug Trumbull had his studio in Western Massachusetts, not far from where I live, and I was able to go out and interview him. Doug Trumbull had an incredible career in the movie industry. He worked on the film 2001.
Mhm.
Um, he did the special effects for 2001. He worked with Steven Spielberg on Close Encounters of the Third Kind and many other films. He was a director as well as a special effects supervisor. But he became disillusioned with the movie industry and left Hollywood, moved to Western Massachusetts, got involved with the theme park industry, and it was his idea to take the concept of a motion simulator that had been used to train pilots and astronauts, well, pilots, I guess
Yeah.
mostly, and to repurpose it for entertainment purposes as a theme park attraction. Um, and that is why he was sort of targeted for the Back to the Future attraction, which had already begun development prior to his getting involved and was failing miserably, and it just looked like it was going to fall apart altogether. But Doug Trumbull kind of came in as the White Knight, and he sort of took control, and he made Back to the Future what it is. That to me ushered in a whole new era of theme park attractions. This idea of sort of crashing the wall between virtual and reality, using screen-based media to transport people to other places, and that we owe a huge debt, I think, to Doug Trumbull for having done that. And he had um, many other innovations that he introduced, and worked on many other attractions through the years. I don't want to bore people with all the details, but he's my choice for the third person on that Mount Rushmore.
Well, I mean, Back to the Future, you mentioned it. It's the pre-2008, the screen simulators and stuff that really kind of defined Universal Studios. So you're right, it did kind of float them for a couple decades.
Yeah, and not just them. I mean, this whole idea of using screens to provide um, content for theme park attractions, a lot of it can be traced back to him, and that I think has just changed the industry
Yeah,
dramatically.
it's still in use today, right? All right,
Absolutely,
who's your
absolutely.
fourth person?
And the fourth person, uh, again, I was having trouble coming up with one. I wanted to sort of pick the person at Universal who was responsible for the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, and I found that really difficult to try to figure out who that person was.
Mhm.
So Tom Williams, for many years, was the head of the park division at Universal. He certainly was very instrumental. Um, Also, um, I would say that Mark Woodbury, who was in charge of Universal Creative, kind of played a very important role. But maybe more than anybody else, Thierry Koo, who was the sort of the lead visionary from Universal Creative, the person who was most responsible for the Wizarding World, is maybe the one if I had to pick one, but maybe we could put all three of them up there from Universal. Um, and it's interesting that we talk about Terry today because I just learned, everybody just learned that he took an early buyout.
I saw that.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so he's taking an early retirement offer from NBC Universal and is leaving Universal after a long, long career there. He actually started, I believe he started at Disney. He used to be with Disney.
Mm.
But anyways, that is my shout out to the team responsible for the Wizarding World of Harry
Yeah,
Potter.
and it's hand in hand because I mean, if Harry Potter is going to be on your events Mount Rush more than the people responsible for it should definitely because you got to think like if that was just another motion simulator where you were flying on the broom or whatever, we wouldn't be talking about it. In fact, it would probably be replaced by now. So it's incredible how much staying power the real investment is, and I don't even want to think about the real investment of the first Harry Potter would be in today's world. It was in the hundreds of millions, if I recall, but I don't know. So, kind of switching gears, but when we talk about the attitudes of guests in the industry in terms of what they're looking for, um, in the 20s and 30s, it was people roller skating rinks and dance halls, and you go all the way up to like say like the early 2000s, late 90s, and you had the roller coaster wars, and nowadays it seems like parks are focusing more on special events and limited time offerings and stuff. What are your thoughts on the changing attitudes over the course of like let's say your career in the theme park industry as far as what guests are looking for?
Well, I think the bar has been raised significantly. That's what I would say. That I kind of think of it like luxury cars. Um, you'll see innovations introduced on um, Mercedes-Benz or Lexus vehicles, and then eventually these kinds of things, whether it's heated seats or heated steering wheels or fancy infotainment systems, they kind of filter down until it's people driving Toyotas have pretty much the same thing because that's what's expected. The bar's been raised. The folks driving a Toyota Corolla want a heated seat as well, and I kind of see that happening at amusement parks and theme parks. Um, People obviously from all over the country, all over the world visit Disneyland, Disney World, Universal, and some of the other destination parks. And then when they go to their local park, they're kind of expecting, if not the exact same thing, at least something that approximates that. And so things like, just a couple, well, it was last year actually, that the volcano attraction that Sally Dark Rides built at Lost Island, this small, modest amusement park in
Yeah.
Iowa, that was extraordinary to me. I can't believe that that thing exists in this tiny park in Iowa. Or even the Justice League attractions at some of the Six Flags parks. To see these kinds of things happening, to see what Dollywood is doing, um, transforming that park into a destination resort with gorgeous hotels, and just really raising their game. What Silver Dollar City is doing, really what the Cedar Fair parks are doing by adding lodging and having food festivals, the kinds of things that you used to see only at Epcot. Now you can go to uh, Carowinds and all kinds of parks and have fabulous food festivals. So I just kind of see that trickle down happening, and the expectations of guests have changed, I think, because the bar's been raised so high.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because Don and I often laugh about how, 10 years ago, theme park food was a joke.
Absolutely.
Nowadays, every park has an executive chef, you know?
I can't agree more. It used to be one of my real big pet peeves,
Mhm.
that amusement parks and theme parks would prevent you from bringing food into the park, thereby forcing you to buy their food, and they would sell this overpriced, incredibly crappy food. And what really kind of bugged me was that the industry was kind of built on this wonderful tradition of great food. If you go back
Yeah.
hundreds of years, or not hundreds, but decades. Go back to Coney Island and Nathan's hot dogs, and there were these great traditions of fabulous food at parks, that for many years was kind of just an afterthought. But you're absolutely right, Ryan. You and Don are onto something that there's been an incredible renaissance with food. And again, it's all about attitudes and it's all about expectations. If you go to a park like Universal and you go to the Toothsome Chocolate Emporium, or to any of the great restaurants they have, or you get a Butterbeer or whatever the case may be, when you go to Cedar Point or Kings Island, you want something that at least approximates that, and the parks are responding by giving their customers that.
Yeah, I never thought I'd see the day where I crave theme park food in the off season. You know, usually it's like I've got to let my gut readjust to it throughout the months of April and May, but it really is incredible. And I've already got an idea. I don't know who I'm going to have as the guest for it, but I want to do a show called Theme Park Culinary Revolution, and bring on one of the executive chefs from one of the parks that's recently been brought on and revamp stuff and talk about like what's the idea behind this.
Great idea.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I think that obviously there's some sort of revenue to be made. They're not doing this as a charity. So clearly, the stale pizza and the gross hot dogs and stuff weren't going to cut it in today's world. So they're adjusting to it. And it's every
Right.
park. I mean, every park that would constitute an executive chef, not your local ticketed park, but I think that's fascinating. I really want to get to the bottom of that. Um so we were talking about screens and things like that. You mentioned Back to the Future being a pivotal moment and theme park history and so on. Um, how do you feel as though technology integrates with the experience at theme parks? And where do you see it like 10 years from now?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer. One thing one recent development that absolutely fascinated me and may hold a clue as to where the industry is heading is, and I don't know if you personally have been able to experience this. I think you said you were at Universal for a few days,
Yeah,
right? Did you
yeah.
say that? Yeah. So, did you get a chance to see the Born Stuntacular?
Oh my gosh, yes. That was the first thing I
Oh my
did.
gosh. Oh
That
my
is the
gosh, yes,
greatest
it's
thing I
right.
have ever seen in my life. If I had died at
N-
the end of
uh,
that show, I would have died happy. That was the best thing ever.
I'm so glad you said that, Ryan, because I kind of had the same reaction. I saw that and my jaw had to be scraped off the floor. Theme park attraction designers have been chasing this holy grail of blurring the line between virtual and reality for forever, really. But certainly over the last, say, 10, 15, 20 years. And they've been getting closer and closer to the point where you, the goal, if the goal is to not be able to tell the difference between where the screen ends and where reality begins, they've never really been able to solve that until I think the Born Stuntacular, and it's just absolutely ingenious. We don't have to go into great
No.
detail here, but just the technology and the innovations and all of the things that they threw at that, it is absolutely mind-boggling. The only way I could tell who was real and who was on screen when I saw it was because it was during the height of COVID, and the live actors were wearing face masks, and the ones on the screen weren't. Otherwise, I don't think I would have been able to tell. It's that good, and I think that gives a hint at where attractions may be heading. Now that they've kind of solved that rubric, I think that we're going to see greater and greater immersion and greater. Um, this idea of the uncanny valley where you go to an attraction or when you see some of the computer generated imagery in movies. I think that they do a great job with animals and fanciful creatures, but when they render human beings, there's still kind of this, it doesn't look quite right.
Right.
Um, that I think is all going to go away, and this idea of theme park trickery is going to be taken to a whole new level. So that's one thing that I think I see. Another trend that I'm seeing that I think over the next 10 years is really going to only increase is this idea of merging a dock ride with a roller coaster.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Uh, I mean, Space Mountain attempted this many years ago, and it's great for what it does, and it was great at the time that it was introduced, and it's still great today. But the Guardians of the Galaxy coaster just, oh my gosh, it just took it to a whole different
Mm.
level. And you probably saw the news just recently that Port Aventura has a roller coaster slash dock ride based on the Uncharted movie coming out this coming year.
Yes.
And that really piqued my interest as well. I think we're going to be seeing more and more of these. In fact, I almost want to put them into a separate category. People always ask me, what's your favorite coaster? And I say, well, you can't really ask me you could ask me what my favorite coaster is, but when I answer it, I say that, well, I have a favorite wooden, a favorite steel, a favorite hybrid, and I think there's a fourth category now, which is themed coaster,
Right.
because they're in a category by themselves. Is Guardians of the Galaxy the best pure roller coaster that I've been on? No. But when you combine the show element with it, that just elevates it to a whole different level that I think puts it in its own category. So I think we're going to be seeing more and more of those. And finally, I would say that augmented reality, I think, is going to be to play more and more of a role. Um, was not able to make it out to Universal Studios Japan to see the Mario Kart ride
Mhm.
at the Nintendo the Nintendo World that they opened out there. But I'm very anxious to go to Universal Studios Hollywood this February when they open their Super Nintendo World and ride that Mario Kart ride, which takes this idea of augmented reality and kind of blows it out of the water, I think. We've tried virtual reality and incorporating that into theme park attractions. And that, I think, by and large, that fad has passed and never really took hold. But augmented reality is a whole different thing, and I think we're going to see more of that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned virtual reality because I was going to bring that up to you because I think you've seen this too at IAPA. It seems like VR takes up more and more of the floor every year, and it's always like tomorrow. This is the technology. This is what everything's going to be. I don't know if that day is going to come. I think that we have so far to go with technology for making those things comfortable, sustainable, enjoyable. I used to do marketing for an escape room, and they added VR, and when
Hmm.
they added VR, it was like VR escape rooms, and I would say 1 out of 20 people got sick from it. We're just not there yet, you know? And you're right. I mean, if you look at like Kraken at SeaWorld, how it had the Kraken Unleashed, I did that. It was fun, but it wasn't fun waiting for 10-minute dispatches because they had to clean every headset. There's got to be a better way. And until there is, I don't think this technology is going to take off. I think what you really see is going
Well,
to be there.
yeah, here's why I think it's inherently flawed. We go to theme parks and amusement parks today for the same reason we went 100 years ago, and that's because we want to go with our friends and family and people we care about to a place where we have a heightened experience, and they're inherently social places. We want to be together, we want to laugh together, we want to scream together, we want to have great food together, we want to high five each other. What we don't want to do is strap on a virtual reality headset and be lost in our own world and literally cannot see the person
Yeah.
sitting next to us. So that's why I think that it's inherently flawed, and why augmented reality, which allows you to not only see, excuse me, see the environment around you and the effects that are going on, and sort of the traditional dark ride experience, but you can also see the people that are around you, and you can see their smiles, and you can hug them and have fun with them and laugh with them. And so that's why I think that holds a great deal of promise.
You know, it's funny. I was on a podcast just as myself long before this podcast called The Future Jam. And their whole subject matter is the future of. So every week was the future of money, the future of housing, stuff like that. Well, they did the future of theme parks. And they tried to argue to me that VR, AR, stuff like that was the future of it. And I pushed back on it. And it was a lot to your point, but also it was kind of like, you know, if you if they built Cinderella Castle at Disney World at Magic Kingdom, you can go there, you can see it, you can touch it, it's really there. If it's a virtual simulation, it just looks like it. I can do that at home. What's the point of going? So I think that
That's
having
right.
substance to it really carries a ton of weight, and I think that that's a lesson that the industry, in its own right, might learn the hard way once they turn towards VR and AR, because a little of it probably goes a long way.
Yeah, and it becomes a bit redundant when you have something like the Born Stuntacular. There's no reason to put goggles on when you already can be transported to another world. You can go to Dubai, you can go to Washington D.C., all while you're sitting in a seat in a theater in Orlando, very convincingly. So why would you want to strap on goggles when you can have that experience?
Yeah, and I think that we're both in agreement that the strapping on goggles thing, as far as current technology is concerned, is probably not going to be huge. Now, with the point with like the Mario Kart ride,
Hmm.
I could see them having a situation where they're able to project objects onto like a windshield or something, almost like a Pepper's Ghost or something. And that could be a good AR experience. But if you had to put on goggles and stuff, and it just, hey, it's a cartoon I'm looking at, I think the novelty will be there, but I don't think that's a sustainable technology as far as like attracting people.
Yeah, yeah. And when I say AR, yeah, I'm envisioning things like that. And I think Disney has been sort of hinting with patent applications that this kind of thing, they may foresee this in the future as well.
Hmm.
This idea that you're talking about, that um, you don't have to put goggles on, but these characters can be projected onto the environment around you in a seamless way that you don't really have to actively do anything. They're just there. And so, yeah. I agree with you on that, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, so another example of that would be, are you familiar with what pixel mapping is?
Yeah.
Okay, so pixel mapping, for those who don't know, and we did discuss this last week on the episode, so you need to catch up on that, is when you have the Christmas lights essentially, and they're individually programmed by the computers to make patterns and stuff like that. Well, I was involved with a project in that in Dayton, Ohio, 2 years ago. It was 2020, and literally they had people coming down from the region, from Columbus and stuff, to do news reports on this cool new thing we're doing. Nowadays, everybody's Christmas tree can have that for $200.
Right.
And so it's not special. No one's going down there. You have to think of the next thing. But I guess that's
That's
always
right.
been true, hasn't it? The 200-foot coaster. Okay, well, they'll build another one. Okay, 300-foot coaster. Okay, 400-foot coaster. So I guess none of this is new to the industry at all. Would you agree?
I would. Nobody's going to be building a 200, 300, or 400-foot roller coaster in their backyard, however, anytime soon, I don't
No,
think.
but I'm saying, like,
So,
why would you travel to Cedar Point to ride Magnum, in say like 1999 when your local park has a B&M hyper? Like
mhm.
I'm not saying like in your backyard. I'm not saying to that extreme, but I'm saying like if you can see it anywhere, then it doesn't have that kind of magic to it anymore.
Right, right, sure, sure. I understand that and agree with that. But also, I got to push back a little bit. It's not necessarily about having the biggest, tallest, fastest. As you, I think, said earlier, those Coaster War days have kind of passed. I mean, there's still hints of that here and
Hmm.
there. It always cracks me up how every year, um, somehow, every single roller coaster that opens breaks some kind of a record.
Yeah.
Just the parameters get more and more narrow and more defined, and and then the general public and often the uninformed media will pick up on it and say, "Wow, this record-breaking, world record-breaking coaster is coming to, wherever our backyard, or our home park." Um, but it's not necessarily about biggest, fastest, tallest. It's about the experience. And, rides like Velocicoaster are not breaking any records, but they're certainly generating a lot of hype because they are
Certainly.
fabulous coasters. So it's not about the records all the time. It's about the actual
Yeah, I
experience.
agree. And with that being said, I would argue that Velocicoaster in 25 years will have the same appeal that it does today, or the same appeal it did when it opened. But when we're talking about like the Bourne Stuntacular, that may not be that special in 20 years. You know?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. You could be right. You could be right. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we kind of touched on this, and I know you don't like to answer this question. What's your favorite coaster? Let's start with steel coaster. What's your favorite steel coaster?
Well, I'm a bit parochial on this one. I told you I lived in Massachusetts. A lot of people are going to say you're out of your mind, but I think the Superman coaster at Six Flags New England, remains my favorite. And I'm going to cop to, it's kind of a hometown pride kind of a thing. But it legitimately is just a really wonderful coaster. When it opened, it was wonderful. It's remained wonderful all these years, and just the combination of the layout is just incredible. The underground tunnels and the smoke and the airtime. I mean, everything about it. I kind of liken it to um, a it's kind of like a great piece of symphonic music where it's got the highs and the lows and everything in between, and you go on it, you experience it, and you just kind of go through this incredible emotional experience. So that's my favorite steel
Well, I mean,
coaster.
it did win the golden ticket forever, so I
Yeah.
think it's justified. What about wooden coaster?
Again, it's a bit sort of local or the Northeast anyways, but it's El Toro. Although I have to say I haven't ridden it recently, and that may change if perhaps I did ride it more recently. But the aggressive airtime on El Toro, the times that I have ridden it, is just mind-blowing to me. So that is my favorite wooden coaster.
I've never been to Six Flags New England, so I remember back in the early 2000s, it was like, "Oh, yeah, Vortex is my favorite steel coaster." It's like, "Have you been on Superman?" And even nowadays, it's like, "Oh, yeah, my favorite wooden coaster is Mystic Timbers or whatever." And it's like, "But have you been on El Toro?" You know? And El Toro's had its share of problems, but hopefully they get that
Yeah.
figured out because, I really wanna ride it. I mean, from what I understand, it's just a fantastic ride experience. What's your favorite, hybrid coaster?
This one you might be surprised. I certainly love Steel Vengeance, and I really, really love Iron Gwazi.
Mhm.
Um, I'll just put in a little side note here that I was the first person outside of Six Flags. I'm sorry, the first person outside of Busch Gardens and RMC to ride Iron Gwazi. I got to ride it and then write about it for the New York Post, so that was a real thrill, and I absolutely loved it. But I just am crazy over Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain. There's something about that ride. It's not the biggest, not the fastest, but because they took this twin racing coaster and converted it into this experience where you go over both hills and you have both drops and I should include that it's my favorite hybrid with the caveat that when the dispatch is timed perfectly
Right.
so that you've got you've got that experience where one train is inverted and the other one is right side up and you're traveling along the same route. That to me is just roller coaster nirvana. I just can't believe it.
Yeah, I've heard good things. I've never been out there to Magic Mountain, so you're making me feel ignorant, but I'm glad you enjoy it. So, I'm gonna hedge this because I know your answer, but besides your hometown park of Six Flags New England, what's your favorite park?
This is a question that I get asked a lot, and I have a great deal of difficulty with it because I don't think it's fair to kind of lump them all together. Um, for example, I absolutely adore, and I mean adore, Coney Island, which isn't really an amusement park. It's a collection of amusement parks and
Mhm.
attractions. And that goes back partly to my childhood when I did spend some time at Coney Island, but more significantly at Revere Beach, which was the country's first public beach here in Revere, Massachusetts. The beach is still there, but the amusements that used to line the beach are long gone. And as is the case with many, many seaside amusement parks, they're no longer um, they're defunct. They're no longer there. So Coney Island is kind of a special place for me because it rekindles those memories that I had as a little kid. So to try to compare that to the destination theme parks is crazy.
Right.
And when I say I love all parks, I mean I really love all parks. I do consider myself a theme park journalist. I have been doing this for 30 years. I try to bring a level of professionalism to it, but first and foremost, I'm a fan. I just have great passion for this. Um, and even though my hair, what little of it is left is totally gray, when I go to parks, I return to those childhood days. I think it's partly why we all love parks. So I love them all. I mean, I love Six Flags, I love the Cedar Fair parks, I love Coney Island. But if you had to make me say, look, you got to pick one, I'm going to say it's Disneyland, and that's because it changed everything in the industry, and it's the park that Walt Disney personally built and walked the streets. And there's just a special charm about the place that um, it's just a place I go and I just feel the echoes of the past there, and I'm amazed at how they continually update and evolve it with things like Star Wars, um, Galaxy's Edge, but still maintain so many of the classic opening day attractions that it's just fabulous. So that's my favorite park.
Awesome. Well, I'm not surprised by that. You talk about a park to have as your favorite. So we're running a little short on time here, so I want to make sure I get this question in because I thought this was interesting. Um, so throughout your career, what's one event you got to attend, article you got to write, historical experience you got to see in person that kind of sticks out to you that you'll always carry with you?
Yeah, again, Ryan, I had a hard time with this one because I've been blessed. I mean, I've really been blessed. The things that I've been able to do, if you told me 30 years ago that here are the things that you're going to get to do over the next 30 years, I would have said you're out of your mind. To come up with one is really, really hard. I mean, just to give you an idea, I mentioned that I was the first person to ride Iron Gwazi. I was the first person to ride Wonder Woman Golden Lasso at Six Flags Fiesta Texas as well.
Wow.
I was the first person to ride Mako at SeaWorld Orlando and got to write about these things. Um, I was invited by Walt Disney Imagineering to make a presentation to them, and so I got to stand in front of them and talk to them, which was a mind-blowing
I'd say
experience,
so.
and then got to tour Imagineering. Um, I last a couple of years ago, a few years ago, I was invited by the wonderful folks at Dino's Wonder Wheel Park to operate the Phoenix Coaster, which was a lifelong dream of mine. I always wanted to operate a coaster, and Dino Vorderis gave me the opportunity to do that. That was amazing. I got to see Islands of Adventure built from the ground up. I followed the progress from concept through opening day, through the Wizarding World opening, and that was amazing. But the two things that I think really stand out, and they kind of bookend at both ends of my career. I was at the 25th anniversary, which was 25 years ago, of Walt Disney World, and that was just an amazing experience, which I could go into detail on, but I'll just let you know one thing, for example. It rained one of the nights of the 25th anniversary of Walt Disney World, the media event that they had, and they were ready to pass out umbrellas to all of the invited media guests. There were 10,000 people from all over the world at this event. There's never been anything like it since then. I met people from Africa, from Australia, from Asia, from everywhere. 10,000 10,000 journalists came from all over the world to the 25th anniversary of Walt Disney World. It was a mind-blowing experience. And then more recently, a few years ago, I was at the opening of Shanghai Disneyland. I was there on opening day. I got to interview Bob Iger for USA Today just prior to the opening, and that was an amazing experience. So I would say those are probably the two that I would pick. But I could go on. There's just uh, pages and pages of things that I've been able to do that I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd been able to do. So I feel very blessed and very honored and very lucky to have been able to do all these things and to continue to do these things and to share my adventures with my subscribers at aboutthemeparks.fun.
Awesome. Well, Arthur, it's about that time, but do you want to plug your website one last time? Tell them where to subscribe, where to find you, your social media channels, and so on?
I think I just did,
Let's
but
give it another shot.
it's about themeparks.fun. I didn't even know that there was a fun URL suffix, but there is. So it's ABOUT themeparks.fun. When people go there, they can subscribe to my newsletter, which comes out twice a week directly to your email. It's news, it's reviews, it's musings, it's thoughts, it's history, it's just everything about the industry that I love. And now I have the editorial freedom to write whatever I want, whenever I want. And if you're a like-minded person who shares the passion for the industry like me, I think you'll have a lot of fun. So you can come and you can subscribe, and I'd love to have you on board. I am on Twitter and on Facebook, and my both at About Theme Parks, ABOUT Theme Parks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Arthur. It's been a real honor. It's been a very interesting conversation, as I knew it would be. I've been looking forward to this one, and I know, again, Don's a little under the weather. He really wanted to be here today, so we're sending positive thoughts to Don. Um,
Absolutely, I was disappointed that Don wasn't able to join us because Don and I go way back, and please send him my best, and I hope he feels better. But thanks so much for doing this, Ryan. It's been a pleasure talking with you as well, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Arthur. Well, everyone, thanks for listening. Make sure that you subscribe at attractions_GRP on Twitter. Follow us on YouTube. Search for the Attractions Group Podcast. and search for the Attractions Group podcast on your favorite podcasting app. We'll see you next week.